Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the MC Scow Happy Hour here on Monday, the 22nd of March. Glad to have everybody here with us this evening. I'm very fortunate to be here tonight with the current MC Midwinter champion, Buzz Reynolds. Buzz, are you here with us?
I'm here.
Hey, Buzz. For those of you who don't know, I was very fortunate enough to, as a high schooler, race with Buzz on his East. I think we managed to win the Easterns and a bunch of regattas, and definitely learned a lot along the way. So it was a fun Midwinters for me to be able to, see Buzz out there in the course, and he beat me up pretty bad, which was pretty fun, and it was really good. And I think it was almost 25 years ago that we sailed the East Scow. So it was good to see Buzz back out there and tearing up the race course for sure. So glad to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
So first thing, before we get into it, we're going to do our normal announcement. And for those of you guys who are out there, please join the MC Scow class. I know all the class officers would appreciate it. If you're not a class member, jump on the mcscow.org, pay the dues. You get your newsletter, you get all the info. I know all the officers work really hard to support the class that we all really enjoy sailing in. And the boat is fun. There's a lot of fun people and a lot of good info out there, and the class needs all the support they can. So if you haven't paid your dues this year, please do so. And on the flip side of that is, if you're going to sail any of the big regattas coming up, I know that Dan Allan, I think, is on the call tonight. He'd be really happy if you're going to go to the Nationals in Iowa to sign up and pay. They're planning on having a huge event out there. And for all the folks in New Jersey, I know the team at Lavalette would love everyone to join and pay for their entry fee for the Easterns, which are in June. So if you have a few moments and can do all those things, that would be great. So anyway, Monday night, we got a little happy hour here, and we were going to do a little recap of, I guess 2 weeks ago now, the Florida trip that I made and Buzz made. And I was fortunate to do two events, one in Sarasota and then the Midwinters. Buzz came down for the Midwinters. Two good events. We had some great results for sales and our new sales, and some fun sailing. So a couple things for everybody. This is a happy hour. It's not a lecture or a presentation. Send your questions via chat. You can also speak up if you have a question and say something. There's Danny on there having a drink. I can see him. So if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and shout it out, or send it via chat, and we'll go from there. So we'll get into it here. See if I can move this forward. Sorry. So Sarasota, it was a really fun event for those of you guys who missed it. It was a 2-day regatta. They scheduled it prior to the Midwinters, so you could do both. It was really windy both days. On Monday, we actually didn't race. It was so windy, which was too bad. It was lucky for me. I got a new boat prior to that, so it gave me the day to kind of get the boat situated, which was nice. And then Tuesday, we did 4 races. It blew probably 12 to 18 knots, shifty, very blue water, dolphins everywhere. Nice chop. For those of you who've sailed in Barnegat Bay, most of you, I think, have. It was very similar sailing conditions. It was a really fun event, actually. So I used the new rocket sail, which is what was the Z1, and with some modifications, and felt really good about it, especially in the upper end of the range. When it got a little lighter, it was a little hard to power up with the chop. The sail is just a little flatter in the top, so it made it a little more difficult, but all in all, felt really good. My big takeaways there in the breeze were, starting was really hard, especially with the chop, and you could see a lot of boats would get slow and they would slide sideways. So as they tried to accelerate, so keeping some pace on in the pre-start was definitely imperative. The other thing that I took away from it was the first time I'd sailed in any waves is how important it is to steer around the waves downwind and not bury the bow. There was a couple of times I filled the boat up with water and thought I was going down for the count. And it was a pretty interesting lesson learned, because, most scows, if you sailed an E or the other boats, you heel to leeward. So there's enough heel that the boat doesn't really plow into waves. Well, this boat, you heel to windward, it doesn't heel quite as far. So it was a real interesting situation for me, because I felt like you really had to get by the lee and try and surf down a wave. And if you came up too fast, you'd hit the back of the wave and the boat would almost want to pitch pole. So or it would at least fill up with water. So it was a good learning experience for me to do that. The other thing that I worked on pretty hard at that event was sailing with the rig really tight in the breeze. And I'd done that at Eustis the regatta before, and got the rig really tight. So from the hand tight, I put almost 2.5 turns on the rig. So it was firm when I was sailing in the breeze, and the boat felt a lot better to me. And that was one of the things I talked to some of the other guys in the class and they were doing. So it was a good event and we learned a lot, and it was a smaller fleet, but it was fun. But now I'm going to bring Buzz in here, and we're going to get to the Midwinters. And here's a photo of Buzz winning the event here in his, one of the older boats in the regatta, which was cool. But it looks, for those of you who know him, it's the exact same color scheme as his Scow, which is amazing to me. But Buzz, talk us through a little bit. First big event, you got there, didn't really know that many people, and kind of were feeling the whole thing out. How'd it go for you?
Pretty well. I made sure I got there early. I drove down with my wife, and I went out and practiced Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon for about 2 hours each day. Just make sure everything checked out and worked, and I got comfortable. And I think that was good just to get used to the lake a little bit. Typical lake sailing, big, beautiful lake, and relatively flat water. And I had the new sail from North, which I looked a little bit fuller to me than the practice sail that I had up, which was an old, I think a 10-year-old sail I got with the boat. So I was kind of curious how things went. On Thursday, the first morning race, the wind I'd say was probably about 10 to 12, hiking weather, and fairly shifty. You had anywhere from 5 to 30-degree shifts coming from the left and the right, typical lake type of puffs. And in an 84 boat fleet, I think the key was just to get off the starting line with clean air in a lane, and I could get out. And basically just kind of went left and came across. And the strategy for me was just be conservative on the first beat, get a clean start, try and be in the top 15 or 20, and then try and gain a few downwind, and then make a move on the second beat where you had to split either hard left or hard right, because the fleet is coming downwind and you really can't go up the middle. So you had to kind of pick a side. And then the last speed is where I kind of rolled the dice and would hang out at one corner or the other. And both times I think I felt I had a chance at winning, but the wind crapped out a little bit on me and I lost the puff. But I moved up in both the second and third beats every time, just working the shifts, working the edges. Boat seam was fine, constantly adjusting and shifting from Mainsheet, Outhaul, Bang, Traveler a little bit. One of the things I talked about when we were at the regatta, I kind of feel most guys keep the Traveler up too far into the middle of the boat, and I kind of sail the MC like I did in a laser or a fin, where the corner of the boom is farther outboard than what most people may feel comfortable with. So that was sort of my thoughts on my boat speed and regatta.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I think you just brought up that was key for me is, I think back to the first race of that regatta, I really struggled on the first beat and the first race. I think I was mid-30s at the first mark. And you brought it up is, just kind of always keeping working at it, right? Because there were so many puffs, shifts, so much traffic. There was a lot of opportunity to not only gain, but there's a lot of opportunity to lose too, right? So it was a venue where you had to kind of stay on your toes, or you would either get passed by or it was never easy, even if you were in front. Is that fair to say?
Yes. In fact, the last beat, I rounded in, I think, 10th or 12th, and probably 5 or 6 boats directly in front of me. And we got a header. They all tacked off, went through the fleet that was coming downwind. I felt there was more wind dead ahead on the left side and just stayed in the wind and basically kind of did a circular route. But I had a 60-degree lift on the last beat and kind of sailed around the fleet that was stuck in the middle, and went beyond the ley line, and then came back and ended up moving up to 5th place. So it was pretty wild with 60-degree shifts at times, and you could lose a lot or gain a lot, but we're just constantly working the shifts. Boat speed was not as important, but you did have to have speed. But I think that was, working the boat.
Yeah, I agree. And it was, I was one of the boats that got stuck there in the middle when you sailed around, because it's a tough choice, right? The boat, the headers were big, so you got to tack, but the boat really seems to like, especially in the lower wind speeds, a puff is all the difference. Even if the angle is bad, the boat goes twice as fast, right? So it almost seems like, if you can find a puff, even if it's a header, you're better off than being lifted and no pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
Alan, one of the things I'd like to ask you, I had my rig at 23 or 28, 3.5 inches.
Yep.
And the side shrouds were fairly loose, so that, the leeward one was always, flapping in the wind.
Yeah.
When you were at Sarasota, you said you tightened it up. What was your rake at Sarasota?
Yeah. So with the other sail, I was sailing at 28.3, and I was pretty tight. So even when it was tight, it stayed at 28.3. When I was in Eustis, I sailed with the sail you had. I was at 28. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. At Sarasota, it's 23.5. In Eustis, I used the Magnum, which is the sail you used, and I was at 28.3. And what I've been doing, which we added to the tuning guide too, was I tighten the rig up to 15 on the loose gauge, and then I back it off 2 full turns as my kind of light air base setting. And that's pretty loose. That's what you would call hand tight. The only reason I've been measuring it is so you actually have an accurate way of doing it over and over again. But I was pretty loose. So even in, like the condition here where you're sitting on the deck, the leeward side, like this photo shows, was pretty loose. And I think it's really important that if it, in the lighter air, if it gets over tight, the mast just doesn't seem to bend right, and the boat just gets underpowered pretty quickly. So I was similar to you. I think most of the guys with the Johnson boats are doing like you had at the 28.3.5. And I feel like the newer boats, 23 is a pretty good number for that sail. So I think you were right in the ballpark there, and pretty standard spreader setting, which I think you had. You measured it. I forget what you told me it was, but
I think it was 4 inches.
Yeah, and that's what I had too, 4 inches. And my takeaway was it's all critical to have right, but it's one of those things you just got to get it close enough, and then you got to get your head out of the boat and sail, because the boat is so dynamic and so is the race course that you just have to have confidence that it's good and then move on. When you get bogged down with the tuning, I think it gets hard. I don't know if that's what you felt or not, but there was no time to think about that on what the course was there.
Yeah, I haven't changed my rig in all year, last summer or the summer before. Yeah. I just kind of put it up and forget it. And I want to experiment a little bit more with the heavy air.
Yeah.
One gentleman down there told me in heavy air, he rakes the mast farther forward to move the center of effort forward. And somebody else told me, no, they drop it back. So I'm not quite sure what to do in heavy air.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things where there's a lot to learn still. I mean, my biggest takeaway, I haven't necessarily changed my headstay length when it's been windy. I've just been going with a tighter rig. I basically felt that in order to Mainsheet hard enough, having a tighter rig would be better. Hoping to do more of that as we get going, especially leading into the Nationals in Iowa. I think it's going to be a pretty important setup to have. So my question for you is, you did a good job at that regatta of getting off the starting line, and there's a lot of boats. How did you do that? Because it's not only is there a lot of traffic, but you had to be able to accelerate and get out of there pretty quickly. And both races you popped out to the front pretty quick. So what did you do to do that?
It's a good thing you didn't see those starts where they had a recall because I was buried. But on Thursday, the 2 good starts I had, sort of middle of the line. They had a mid boat race committee boat, so you had basically 2 separate lines. And I felt the first race I wanted to go left versus right. It looked like more wind, and I didn't want to be at the committee boat or the pen end. I just kind of started in the middle, and just kind of worked my way through and pushed a few people up, create a little space to leeward of me. And so when I could come off the line, I had some room to foot, and it just worked the boat pretty hard. And I tend to pinch the boat, so people who are on my hip, I could kind of push them back a little bit by pinching, and then I would come off, get some speed, and that's how I kind of worked out. The second race, definitely a wind shift came in on the about a minute to go, and I was down towards the pin in. I was maybe 10 boats up. Allan, you were more in the middle of the starting line and was able to attack the port. I also was able to attack the port and come across, and I think I rounded 10th. So just you don't want to be where the crowd is on a large starting line. In an 80 boat fleet, getting a bad start is tough to make up. So you really just want to get out and have some clean air and hope to be in the top 20 or so at the first mark. And then you can sail it like a small boat regatta. But the first leg is critical to get clean air, get a lane, and just get out away from other people. And then you can start sailing your own race.
Yeah, and I think that's, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it was really important to do some homework on which end of the line you felt comfortable with. For those of you who weren't there, there was a midline boat. The line was pretty long. I timed it in the first race. It took 3 minutes and 32 seconds to go from what we would call the boat end to the pin end. So at 5 minutes to go, I was hovering around that mid boat and really realized that, you got to make a decision at basically 4 minutes which way you're going to go, because if not, you're going to run out of time to get where you need to be and kind of set up. So making sure you did enough pre-race homework and had enough confidence to hedge on which side of the line you wanted to be. But I agree with Buzz, the traffic management was crucial, because if you didn't have enough space to either put the bow down and go or attack if you needed to, it was really difficult for folks who got trapped into fighting for a lane right off the line, because 2 minutes into the race, the guys who got clear were gone, in my estimation. I don't know if that's how you felt, but if you got backed up, I mean, the first race for me, it was brutal. I got kind of stuck under 2 boats and couldn't get out, and it was really hard to clear out of there. So it was, yeah, for me, that was a big one. For all you guys, I'm going to interrupt real quick. If anybody has questions, again, unmute, throw your questions out, or you can send them in the chat box if you have any. But this is here for everybody. So again, send your questions no matter what they are. We'll do our best to answer them. So for me, Buzz, one of the challenges of this boat actually is sailing downwind, right? And knowing when to either sit on the high side and sail like laser where you heel to windward, or kind of old style scow sailing where you heel to leeward. What's your feeling about that, or what did you get out of that?
I'm still trying to figure it out, because when I first got in the boat, I would heel the boat to weather. I actually moved from the back of the boat towards the front where the crew would sit, and try and, like a laser, put the weight forward and heel the boat to weather. But, there are guys around me who are heavier and they were going just as fast. So it's a little frustrating to be trying to work every wave and steer the boat. Yeah. And you're going just as fast as the guy next to you who's really not doing a whole lot. And there was a mix. Some people were heeling the boat to leeward in the lighter stuff, and then others were heeling to weather. I think and both of them paid at times. I think when the wind went real light, I'd heel the boat to leeward to be trying to match what the guys around me were doing if they were going fast. And if a puff came through, then I would switch and hop up to the weather side and try and let the sail all the way out and sail more by the lee and heel the boat to weather as much as I could. I hike out downwind. I actually put in an adjustable hiking strap on my boat before I went down, because I find I'm constantly adjusting my hiking straps depending on how hard I hike. Off the starting line, I'll try and go straight leg and as hard as I can to get that boat flat. But your legs get tired, and then I'll tighten up the hiking strap. And then downwind, if the straps are too loose, I find it hard to hike out. So I can adjust the hiking strap downwind, tighten it up, and then I can get my feet much tighter to the floor and feel much more in control of the boat with a tighter hiking strap. So, I don't know if anybody else has put in adjustable straps on either side of the deck, but for me, I found that helpful.
You're confirming one of the things that I've been thinking about here for a while, was doing that for that reason, because I think downwind, they're too loose from your upwind setting, and you got to be able to adjust them. So one of the guys who were at the regatta, we did this, for those of you on here, we did a little training practice session in January, I guess it was. And we were talking about this downwind. And one of the guys who'd been in the class a long time said, if I'm heeling the boat to windward, if I pull on the main sheet and there's not enough pressure for the sail to immediately go back against the shrouds, then I know I need to sit to leeward. He's like, if you pull the main sheet and the boom kind of lingers there, or it's not like a forceful pull right back to the shrouds, that's when he sits to leeward downwind. He said, if he's sitting on the high side and he pulls the main sheet and like the boom goes right back out, then he knows he's doing the right thing of sitting to windward, which seemed like an interesting little, anecdote about it. And
Rule of thumb, yeah.
Work. So I've been trying to do that. It seemed to work really well at that event. The other thing I did, and it's rare for me, and your photo shows them here, is I ditched the masthead fly and just went for shroud telltales. It just seemed a lot easier with the boat there and seeing the wind and doing things. I don't know if you have both, or tell me about why you chose that. You can see them here in your photo.
I have all three. I have a wind pennant up the top of the mast. I use that mostly for downwind. I never look at it upwind. I use the telltales on the shrouds upwind, but I'm really looking more at the mainsail telltales. And I kind of use a triangle is what I have in mind. I look forward for the wind, I look in front of me for the waves, and I look at the sail. And so my eyes are constantly rotating from way down the course to right in front of me to the sail. And I constantly use that rotation of my eyes to keep track of what's going on and make sure the boat is quiet through the waves. You really got to keep the boat quiet. If you see a bunch of waves, I'll heel the boat, I'll head down, I'll work the main sheet, pump it a little bit through the wave. But waves will just kill this boat, and you got to keep it moving. And I use really probably the telltales on the mainsail more than anything to guide me if I'm over trimmed or if I need to ease the sail a little bit. Got it.
So, I was sitting here thinking about stuff to talk to you about. And again, if you guys have questions out there, fire away, because, we're running short on content here if you don't. The Nationals are coming up. We have a couple big regattas here early in the season. We have the Easterns, we have the Nationals. So, you did this regatta, you came away with some ideas. Obviously, you won the event, but knowing you're going to keep trying to improve. So as you look to the Easterns and the Nationals, what are things you think you should work on, from learning at that event and, from last year and all these other things that you're going to try and focus on for the next two events?
I definitely going to the Nationals was I kind of, after the Midwinters, I felt, gee, maybe I should spend the time and the money and go out to Iowa, even though it's pretty far. And I don't like to travel far, but I think it's worth it this time. And it's early in the season, so there should be good breeze out there. I think I'm going to focus on heavy air and try and get the right setting, whether I should move the mast forward or back or tighten up the rig a little bit and just see, I have decent speed. So my plan is to sail in the spring series at Matitaconk and Toms River as much as I can and use those regattas to try and adjust different things and see what the impact is on my boat speed, if it's faster or slow, and use those as practice regattas for the Easterns and then the Nationals.
Yeah. I mean, my big takeaway from the event was just figuring out how to work on it. And, because I'm in Annapolis a lot of the time versus the shore, so there's not that many boats here. And just, one of the things I came away with is I really need to make sure my boat handling is cleaned up while I'm by myself, right? I mean, there's not much I can do here without other boats. So, one of the things I'm going to try and focus on hard is getting my boat handling cleaned up. It doesn't seem like it's that hard, but you can attest to it. Just things like getting around the leeward mark clean or, accelerating off the starting line at that regatta seemed to make a pretty big difference. So it seemed like one of the things that I came away with as something to focus on quite a bit.
I agree. And that goes back to my laser and fin days is, we would do just hundreds of tacks in a day.
Yeah.
When I went down to Midwinters on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the first thing I would do when I go out, I would try and do like 20 tacks. And, I'd screw up probably half of them. And I need to work on it. Last year, I flipped 3 times upwind in light air because I couldn't get my fat ass across the boat.
Yeah.
I had the bang too tight, or I slipped, or I was trying to pull the board up and the main sheet was cleated. So I really want to focus on my footwork, like a laser when you tack, it's like you need 5 steps. One, pull the weatherboard pennant or back up. Number 1, make sure the vang's not on too tight. Number 2, pull the windward board pennant so the board goes down. Number 3, my foot goes back, my back foot goes across over the hiking straps. So when I do turn, that foot is automatically under the new hiking strap. Take the main sheet, and then I may try and roll tack the boat a little bit if I can. I think that really helps the boat if you can roll tack it, trim in, heel the boat, and then head it up, trim it in, and then roll tack it over, and then get out on the new side and try and flatten the boat down, and then pull the board up. What I realize is you could probably, I've been trying to get the old board up too quickly, and I think it's better to get my mainsail and my body in the right position and then worry about the old board and getting it up. Trying to get it up too quickly, I let the boat heel, I don't trim the main enough. So you really got to get, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps and just repeat it so that you have confidence when you're in a group of boats that if you tack, you can gain a half a boat like every time.
I agree with everything you said there. I've learned the lesson too, that you're 100% right. You got to come out of the tack and get the sail and your body right before you even attempt to mess with the board. Because if you go for the board right away, and I call it, if you don't stick the landing, right? Like if you don't get on the perfect angle so the boat accelerates, if you end up high or low and you're messing with the board, that could be the difference of crossing someone. So it's a huge thing to work on. It took me a while because I kept focusing on the board, and you're 100% right. The board should be low on the totem pole. I mean, obviously you got to do it, but you're right. I mean, the boat heels over, most of it's not in the water anyway, right? I mean, you just got to get going and then get it up.
Al, there's some questions. Why don't you go ahead and address them?
We do got some questions. So first one was from Sean Bradley. Do you adjust the leech cord at all in the heavier breeze? So it's a good question from Sean, and our new sails do have a leech cord for the first time. I think it's really important. We did a bunch of sailing in January, and it drove me nuts how the leeches would flap without a leech cord in there. So yeah, I did pull it on when it was windy enough. The key is making sure it's off when it's light, but it's definitely, when there's a little bit of breeze, it's a nice upgrade, especially in the upper quarter of the sail between the top end and the head, where there's a little extra roach. It would kind of flap a little bit. And the new sail now, we can just pull that little cord on and it makes it go away, and it's really nice. And I think the adjustments right on the boom, right by the main sheet blocks, there's a little Velcro. You just kind of pull a little bit, Velcro it back down, and it makes it really nice. So yeah, it was a good adjustment to add to the new sail for sure. And it's going to be in basically all the new line of sails that we have coming out. We have a question from Mark Beaton. Do you think there's value in sweeping the spreaders further aft in light air, flat water? So for me, and this is, kind of my sailing here a little bit, I think the 4-inch mark is pretty good as an all-purpose setting. They're pretty hard to adjust on the water. If I knew it was going to be a really light air day and really flat water and we were going to sail that way the majority of the day, I probably would sweep them back a touch more just to give the mast a little more bend. One of the things Buzz and I talked about was you almost have to keep the main sheet on in light air to bend the mast so the sail doesn't get, too knuckle forward and the shape is funny, like in a laser. If you don't have the vang on, it's kind of the same thing. So I agree with you, Mark. I would probably sweep them back. And one of the things that's coming into play now in the class that's new is a lot of the newer boats all the new boats have spreaders that are not only adjustable in sweep, but they're adjustable in length. So this is something that's going to go on. My personal feeling is that the max length spreaders are going to be pretty important, especially when it's windy. But there's going to be, some time to tell on what's going to be the right spreader length now included with the sweep. I think the current standard spreader, like a fixed spreader, is, I think it's 16 3/4 or 17 inches off the face of the mast. But in the class rules, the spreaders can be 18 inches off the mast. So if you look at the new boats, the spreader tip has an adjustment to extend the length out, it goes in and out on the length. And then they have these new barrels that you can adjust the spreader sweep. So the one change that's happened in the boats here in the last year or so is the newer boats are getting this Selden spreader setup. that I think is going to change it quite a bit. So if I was everyone, I'd keep my ear to the ground on how that's going. But back to the original question, I do think if it was really light, and Eustace, I probably made the mistake on the last 2 days of not sweeping back a little further if we had raced to do that. Let's see what else we have. Sean asked if I've seen a big speed difference with the spreaders. My gut tells me in heavy air is where we're going to see the spreader really help out, because it's going to keep the mast stiffer, or, you know, when you vang sheet, the mast isn't going to pop out of column with the spreader length quite a bit. And going back to what Buzz and I were talking about in light air is having the mast bent enough so the sail shape gets right. And one of the things we changed on the new sail, and Buzz, you actually mentioned it to me, is that the second batten down now is a little shorter than in the older sails. And that was basically done to allow the draft in the sail to slide aft from the mast a little bit, especially in the lighter air. If you noticed before, the second batten was really long. It was like 2/3 of the weight of the mast. And what happened was in light air, it'd be super stiff. And then you'd only have, you know, this much sail unsupported by batten. So it got really shaped forward and you really had to bend the mast more. It was one of the changes we made on the new sail that I think made a pretty big difference. Actually, I can show it to you on this photo. So if you look at the old sails here, this is the Magnum prototype, but right here at the second batten, you can see it goes really pretty far forward. And on the Magnum, the new sail, it comes basically just in line with this top batten. So it basically ends, you know, 8 or 9 inches shorter than they did on the prototype. So the old Z Max, the second batten was really long. It was the same as the third batten down, but now on the new sails, it's similar to the top, so they're shorter. And it basically allowed for the sail to have a lot better light air shaping. And it was one of the things that when we did the computer analysis, which is the photo on the bottom, we noticed there was too much shape forward up high. And we wanted to push it further aft, especially in light air. So one of the changes to do that was with the batten. And in speaking of that, that's where the tuning guide really came in. Mike Marshall, who's the sail designer who handles all this stuff, isn't on the call. But one of the things we were able to spend a lot of time on was computer modeling the MC Scow and coming up with some of these tuning numbers and mass rakes to really kind of lock it in and make sure we were happy. And he actually was doing a little test on that today to make sure we felt happy with it. And I think this is one of the big things that's happening with the sails here in the last little bit is the design team is really buckling down to help us with a lot of this stuff. And, you know, this photo here that's on the bottom left with the color for the shaping is stuff that we're using on, you know, all the America's Cup things. There's the same design program that they're using. We're now using it in the MC Scow, which we didn't before. And it is making the sails a lot, you know, user-friendly in my opinion. So, you know, I think that's the one thing that, you know, people ask us, you know, what's the big difference now before, and not that we're trying to get off track of the regattas or do anything here, but, you know, remember that we do this, we only make sails. You know, I'm in this as a sail maker, North Sails, the whole team. We're in here just to make the fastest sail we can make. And it's not necessarily about building a boat or selling parts or doing all these other things. I mean, we just want to make sure, you know, nothing made me happier than having Buzz get a new sail and come and win the regatta, knowing that our hard work, you know, did what it was supposed to do. It's not about me going and winning. It's about people like Buzz being able to get a sail and go, and having the tuning numbers, and he had the confidence to just go and win the regatta. So,
You mean an old guy in an old boat?
Old guy in an old boat. I mean, this was the funny part for me is you got there and you arguably had the oldest boat in the regatta and still won. I think
It wasn't the oldest. It was the second or third oldest.
Yeah, pretty close. So out of 83 boats, you know, you had you had the 80th oldest boat probably out of the 83 boats, but you know, you got a good sail and a new sail. You got to the regatta, you did a day of practice, and you went out there and just did your thing and won. So it kind of alleviated a lot of the, you know, I've been overly sensitive about what kind of boat I had. You basically proved the point that it doesn't matter. So
it doesn't matter. In my mind, the boat doesn't matter. I think I like having a good all-around sail because we've always been in regattas and the wind will be light and it'll pick up, or the wind is medium and it'll die. And I just like having confidence. I can put up a sail and I can compete in light, medium, or heavy air. I know how to shape the sail and trim it so I can be competitive in everything. And that's my philosophy is I'd rather keep it simple, stupid.
yeah.
And the fewer the things I can think about, the better off I am to just watch the wind, because that's really where you win and lose the regatta.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I mean, you actually showed it to me. It was just, not worrying about the other stuff and worrying about sailing the course. You were just like, give me the sail. I'm going to go sail my boat. And you didn't even think about it anymore. You just went and raced. And I think that's the key, is getting off of the other stuff and focusing on racing the boat. And that's how the good teams or good boats are doing well at these events, right? They're just focusing on racing, in my mind. So I had another question for you. So do you still use the 4-to-1 main sheet, or did you switch to the 5-to-1?
I went to the 5-to-1, but I can adjust it to make it 4-to-1 or 3-to-1. And I find the 5-to-1 is really necessary in the heavy air. It gives me more fine control over the sail and without getting tired. So there was a gentleman there who on 3-to-1. I said, if the wind's over 12 knots, he can't adjust as quickly as I can. And I can hold the main sheet in my hand the whole time practically, and feel comfortable. If the wind goes real light and I'm confident it's going to remain light, I may rerun it to go to a 3 or 4-to-1 so I don't have all that main sheet.
Yeah, I agree. And last question here that I got to ask you, someone who's not on the call but wanted me to ask you. So how much do you focus on heel angle? Because I think, for people who sail scows all the time, it's the most common talked about thing, right? How critical do you think heel angle is to sailing the boat?
Critical. Whether it's the M Scow or the E Scow, I've sailed them all for 30 plus years. You got to keep the boat heeled and moving. If you go flat, you're going to go slow. So one of the things, if people actually commented after regatta, because in the light, couple of the races where the wind went light, I'm actually standing up in the middle of the boat and leaning to leeward to kind of keep the heel and still watch the wind, the race course, and where the wind was. And to me, I like being able to see where the wind's coming from, but I got to hail the boat. And you can do that if you stand up.
So got a question for you. So Mark Lewis is curious about your traveler settings. And I actually think this is something you talked about at the regatta that I think took a lot of people, myself included, a little bit by surprise, because, I think the common rule of thumb in the MC is, unless you're overpowered, leave the traveler in the middle. And you definitely were not doing that. I saw you, after you said that, watched you sail, and you had the traveler down even in the lightest stuff. So talk a little bit about how and why. I mean, you touched on it a little bit before, but I think it's interesting because it's a different way to do it, and it clearly works. And I think it kind of opens the door for especially smaller people to be competitive in the lighter, or, basically in any air.
Well, the basic deck is we don't have a jib to accelerate the flow over the leeward side of the sail. Like in an E-Scow, you can, bring the traveler into the middle and you play it in heavy air, but you're working the jib car and the main traveler together. In a single-handed boat like the Laser or the Fin, I never had the boom in the middle of the boat. And I just feel like if I have it outboard, I was checking myself on Friday even. I think the closest I ever came up was like 5 inches off center. And I'm looking at the end of the boom and where it is in relation to the corner transom of the boat. And it just, to me, I feel like the boat can breathe more, especially if I trim down hard to bend the mast and flatten the sail in light air. If you're inboard and you've eased the main sheet off, the mast is straighter, the draft in the sail is farther forward. And to me, that doesn't work. It may be fast right after you tack, but you've got to get that draft back, and you want to flatten a little bit so you can point. And by trimming down harder, you got to have the traveler down. So it's a personal style. Everybody has their own style and what works for them. And this is my experience in sailing fins and lasers for 20 plus years.
I think the concept of it is spot on, because you're right. If the traveler's gonna be in the middle, you just can't sheet as hard. You can't. The sail is gonna be twisty and open. And if you want leech tension and you want the sail to be, have some flow coming off the leech and have the telltales on the leech even moving, you have to drop the traveler if you're gonna trim that hard. So it's definitely a different in style, because I think a lot of folks are more comfortable with the sheet eased. But I agree with you. There's a lot to be said for traveler down and trimming hard, even in the lighter stuff, for the reason you're saying is bending the mast is pretty important, I think. And that even goes back a little bit to Mark's comment of maybe you need more spreader sweep in the light stuff. But, you know, it's hard because if you get caught out and it gets windy, then the mast bends too much, right? So this allows you to be more versatile is basically the way I'm taking what you're saying. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I know when you get the when the mast is bending too much, you get those diagonal wrinkles. You know, the mainsail is going inside out. And so that would be like my pointing mode. If I had speed and I want to point up, I'd over trim and get those little diagonal creases, because I know then the mast is bending, the sail's really flat. But I have to be careful not to go too slow. And so I'll ease up and get rid of those wrinkles and head back down. So it's kind of a scallop course you're sailing. You're trying to go fast, or when you get your speed, then you come back up. And you got to, you know, be aware of all that with the boats around you, whether you can foot or pinch. And you got to have that main sheet in your hand and adjusting it all the time.
Yeah. So we got one other question here of, you know, from an anonymous question is, if you look at the sail and the top third of the sail is stalled, you know, what adjustments need to be made? And you do see that from time to time. And it's a common, there's many issues that could cause that. Some of it could just be different wind shear at the top of the mast. Some of it could be, you know, your spreader angle is a little off, so the mast is not bending, or it's bending too much at the top. Could also be a Cunningham tension issue. So there's a lot of issues there. One of the things I've kind of focused on is, if the top of the sail is stalling a little bit, is just actually pulling the Cunningham on and releasing it and just seeing if the sail resets in the way it's laying in the mast, and that seems to help it out quite a bit. But it does happen from time to time. Mark asked, do you think dropping the Traveler also opens the lower leech and prevents it from stalling? I actually do think that happens, for sure. And I think one of the things that happens, you know, to Mark's question, is you see a lot of folks looking for power, and they actually make the mistake of over easing the outhaul. And what happens is you just get so much drag in the lower leech that the lower part of the sail ends up stalling, and people keep just sheeting out more, and it basically compounds the issue. And if you look, like I looked at Buzz sailing a few times, I mean, even in the light air, he's got outhaul on to make sure that the bottom of the sail is correct and that bottom batten's not too hooked, because if it's too hooked, then he's got to drop the Traveler even more to get it so it opens up. Is that fair?
Yeah, but the only time in heavy air, I would pull that outhaul really tight, and, you know, so there's, you know, stress creases in it. But normally medium air, it was just kind of nice and easy. But if I saw like a bunch of waves and I needed some power, then I would ease the outhaul off and almost get like a little up by the mast. I could, you know, the luff line or the foot line would actually come out of the track a little bit, and I'd really power up. But most of the time, the outhaul is fairly medium to tight, and so I can keep that lower part of the sail flat.
Awesome. Well, I don't think we have too many more questions here. So
I have one question.
Shoot.
Anybody thought about a reefing the mainsail? I
knew you were going to ask that.
I think this boat is ripe for a reef. If you could drop the sail 8 inches, 12 inches, it would open up the ability to control the boat for a guy of lighter weight, from 150 pounds to 170. Instead of needing a crew at maybe 12 or 15, it could go another 3 knots higher. For myself, I'm 200. I'd start needing a crew when at 17 or 18. And if I could put the reef in, I feel I could probably sail up to, you know, 20 under control. We use the reef in the A-cats, which is basically the MC is just a small A-cat. And having reefing, even though you're losing sail area, you can control and sail a boat much easier. And the boat under a reef, upwind, I swear, can be faster than a boat out of control, being overpowered from too much sail. And I'd like to see that tried. And I may take an old sail and have that done to it, because I'd like to try it. I've looked at the rules. If we use the Cunningham hole, because you're allowed one Cunningham hole, you could pull that down and make that the new tack. The question is on the clue is, I'm not sure if it's allowed to have a second hole up above the clue, because if you had a second clue hole, you'd have to have some reinforcement. And I think the rule disallows a second reinforcement area. So it may require a rule change, but I'm willing to throw an old sail and try it and demonstrate it this spring. Does anybody else think it's a good idea?
I see some nodding heads, so I think people are in support of maybe giving it a shot for sure. I think it's got some validity if it works. I don't know how you'd rig it up and do all those things, but I think it's worth looking at. I mean, it makes sense to me in terms of and any other boat, if it gets windy, you reef, right? I mean, that's just what you do. So, I mean, there's no reason not to give it a try, see how it goes. I mean, it's the only control you have. It's not like you have a backstay or any other things that you can do to keep it under control. So I don't think it's too out of the question to give it a shot.
Yep.
Dan asked a question. He said, with the Z-Max, we used to pull the outhaul of the white band almost always. With the Magnum, would you do the same? I think upwind you would do when it's windier, you'd go basically as hard as you can. I think it's a little lighter. There's a little bit more of a foot shelf and it's a little fuller down low, so you can ease it a little bit to get power. So I do think there's a little more outhaul range designed into that sail, so you can do that. It has a little more versatility for sure. And the one thing about that sail too is it's made out of different cloth. That's a little same weight, but a little softer feel. It's one of the cloths we use in Star Main. I think it sets up really nice for lighter air and goes up range pretty big. So you'd be able to do it. Sean wrote, the clue reinforcement has to be no more than 30 inches, so large enough to match the Cunningham hole for a reef. Yeah, I think you could do it as long as you stuck it in. The secondary reinforcement is big enough. I can actually, we'll take this part of it offline, but I can look and see where the secondary reinforcement goes, see if it'd be strong enough, but you probably could do it. And we'll just wrap up with two things. So I got one more clarification on the downwind, when to go high side or low side. And again, this is what I was told, and it seems to work, is if I'm sitting on the high side and I pull the main sheet like to pump it, if the sail doesn't forcefully go back, basically try sitting to leeward, because there's just not enough pressure to keep the sail out. And, you know, the question is, if you're sitting to leeward, how do you know when to switch? But it seems like if you're on the high side and there's just no pull on the sail, you're better off being to leeward. Just from a wetted surface standpoint, the boat seems to heel to leeward easier than to heel to windward. And I think that's a pretty big deal. The other thing I take it is in light air. If you think about it, if you're heeling to windward, the boat wants to bear off. If you're heeling to leeward, the boat wants to head up. So if it's light air, you're constantly heading up to get pressure in the sail to get speed anyway. So if you're heeling to windward, it's actually counterintuitive. You're trying to get the boat to accelerate. The only way to accelerate is to head up, and you're basically forcing the boat to turn the wrong way. So I think that's really why in light air, it's critical. If you don't think you're going fast enough, you got to get to leeward so the boat goes bow up and accelerates pretty quick. Buzz, you have any other feelings about that, or do you think that's pretty clear?
Fine.
Good. Well, that was a good almost hour here that we got out of this. And the thing that I'm excited about is the excitement in the class right now seems off the charts. I don't know, Buzz, how you felt the regatta, but just the enthusiasm for sailing the boat and the regattas coming up was really high, in my opinion. And it felt like, you know, the class is really in a strong position going forward here with the whole Jersey thing blowing up. The Midwestern guys are all fired up. I mean, everyone's talking about getting to Iowa for the Nationals and then to New Jersey for Nationals the following year. There just seems to be a lot of excitement about it, which is pretty fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think being in an old boat shows you don't need to buy the most expensive and the latest gadget out there. Just get a decent hull and put up a good sail. There are plenty of sail makers. You know, I know an Allan, and I've had the North, you know, for the last 2 years, so I'm comfortable with it. I understand it, and it's just a great way to go out and have fun and sail with a bunch of guys. And you know, there was no protest. There was very little yelling or screaming. So it was very enjoyable out on the water, and it was great.
I agree. Well, Buzz, I owe you, you know, you have to tell me what your favorite wine or drink is, because I owe you for this, giving us this hour tonight to spend with everybody. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing everyone at the next few events. Primarily the first big event, at least for us East Coasters, will be the Easterns in June. And we hope a lot of people who aren't from the East Coast come out and sail. But if you have any questions, I'm sure you can ping Buzz and he'll help you. And if not, I definitely will do it. And if you have any questions, check out the new tuning guide that's on the website. And if you're, looking for a new sail for the Nationals, give me a call or give Eric Doyle a call. We need to get them going here pretty soon, as June's right around the corner, but we'd love to have more folks using one of the 2 new North sails. And we look forward to seeing everyone out there shortly. And yes, to Fletcher, this is recorded. It'll be on YouTube shortly. But again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to Laura, who helped behind the scenes put this together. Thank you to Buzz. And we'll see all of you out there on the water soon. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks, Buzz.
Take care.